Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to Interchange, and thank you so very much for joining us. We will talk about a plan proposed by a Milwaukee alderman aimed at stopping the city from going down the tubes. With the recall elections behind us now, we will also talk about how the political landscape in Wisconsin changes in the months and years ahead. And there may be new life for the idea of an Indian casino at the old Dairyland racetrack in Kenosha. All right, let me introduce everyone. We have Avi Lank, longtime business reporter for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, now retired. Kevin Fischer, longtime broadcaster, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio.
Does long time mean old? You called Avi and me long time.
Kevin Fischer, soon to be retired. Denise Callaway, the coordinator of business and community partnerships for the Milwaukee Public School System. And Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert.
Didn't call him long time.
Rick Horowitz, along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, sometimes Milwaukee Alderman Bob Donovan gets accused of grandstanding, but I was kind of surprised that his proposed plan to bring more order to the city of Milwaukee streets didn't get more attention this week. Apparently, the problems at State Fair helped inspire Donovan to suggest Milwaukee pursue some pretty drastic changes because he thinks time is running out to address the problems. He suggests an overhaul of juvenile justice system, more cops on the street, more police overtime, not less, more neighborhood surveillance cameras, orphanages, boarding schools, and a revamped public school system. Is there a will, though, at City Hall, Denise, to make any of these changes?
Well, here's the thing that I find interesting about that. With all those things that you listed, there's nothing that would have prevented or still prevents Alderman Donovan from working with the appropriate parties, either in the city, the county, or the state level, to do those things. And in the time that he's been alderman, those are not things that he's pursued. So, it makes one wonder why this particular plan is coming out now, why someone who's had the opportunity to help to influence some of these pieces, with the possible exception of the work that he's done around surveillance cameras, that it hasn't been done. So, I think if someone believes that there are issues and problems, great, talk about them. But when you're in a position of power like an alderman, what are you going to do to move those ideas forward? And quite frankly, why haven't you done it in the past?
Kevin, you were saying last week we should have more cops and we shouldn't be worried about controlling overtime as much as we are. Do you agree?
I think all of the things, including those, are meritorious and deserve some discussion. But I'll tell you, I don't see them going anywhere, and it's not because they're bad ideas, but they are expensive. Where's the money going to come from? Where's the political will? And where's Ballman's support? I give him a world of credit for bringing these things up because no one else has, no one else will, at least now, Denise. No, maybe his track record along these lines hasn't been stellar in your opinion, but now he's talking about it. Somebody has to raise the issue. Somebody has to bring this to the fore, and I don't see anybody doing it. I don't see anybody recognizing or admitting that there is this problem in certain sections of the city of Milwaukee. I don't see anybody even talking about it. Maybe two people that come to mind, Sheriff Richard Clark, or David Clark, excuse me, and nationally the mayor of Philadelphia. Otherwise, no one here is bringing it up. It's just, like you said, it's not getting attention because, that's Bob Bauman, he's just shooting, Donovan shooting his mouth off again, and it's the same old stuff. We need more cops. How about an orphanage here and there? They're meritorious to a certain degree. Every single proposal he's making, but for the reasons I stated, the lack of money, the lack of political will, the lack of support, I don't see it going, and the fact that nobody wants to stand up like he's doing. So they're going nowhere.
Avi, but it's important to point out that, again, this afternoon, crime figures were released, and it shows that crime is down again in Milwaukee.
That's right. With all due respect, Kevin, if you have a population that has been being ground down and felt it's being ground down and is being harassed in all kinds of strange and subtle ways, and you're telling that community, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You got to go find a job in an economy that doesn't have a lot of jobs. And then you come up with a plan like the alderman came up with, essentially says, make the grinding even harder. I don't see how that helps accomplish your goals. I will, though, say that even like a blind squirrel, he found one nut in this plan. And nut being a good thing, I'm sorry, not being a bad thing. And that is, he does say that the mayor ought to be responsible for appointing the school board. And I have long thought that is a good idea, because I think one of the big problems with MPS, they're myriad, but one of the big problems, and one of the ones that can probably be addressed, is that there's nobody the public can point to and say, you know, you are responsible for making this work. And if there was a mayor who appointed the school board and it was no question that the buck stopped on his desk or her desk, I think that might help to try and attack some of the problems at MPS that he's talking about. But more surveillance cameras, more cops on the beat, more orphanages, that just increases the kind of pressure that resulted and I think that was part of the reason for some of the acting out that we've seen in this community the last few months. And I'm not sure how you stop the acting out by squeezing harder.
Well, taking the vote away from people in the city of Milwaukee for their school board is not going to stop some youths from turning into mobs and going out and creating havoc.
Do you understand, though, how when Donovan looks at the situation and sees the stuff in River West, sees the stuff at State Fair, says, okay, we have so many neighborhoods in Milwaukee that are teetering right now. We have got to do something before they do go down the tubes.
And actually, there are people who are just as concerned as Alderman Donovan in the African-American community that are stepping up to the plate. Yesterday, the superintendent, Dr. Thornton, convened about 20 African-American leaders in his office, and he challenged them not just to be as outraged as he is with how some of our youth are behaving, but to do something about it. And out of that came some very specific suggestions that were made and some money put on the table. And I'm not going to steal his thunder. He'll announce it at the appropriate time. But something is being done by those very leaders of those institutions that have been asked to come together and not just bring forward some ideas, but some new energy, some new effort to kind of reverse this trend of many of our young people just sliding backwards.
And that's good, because if you don't like the alderman's plan, or his sack of proposals, then come up with something else.
And they're doing that.
I agree, but they got to be carrots as well as sticks.
Well, and what if we take a look at what some of the serious issues are that are facing this community that certainly is impacting the way that kids are behaving: poverty, lack of jobs, lack of access to health care. Some of these things are things where the alderman can make a difference, but it hasn't happened yet. The city can play a role, and the Common Council can play a role in job creation. You give families jobs, you help to stabilize families. Some of the things that we're seeing that are happening are not as likely to happen. Those are places where he can step forward with some great ideas, actually be able to move people forward and rally people around him and make a difference.
Denise,
what we're talking about,
you have nailed it. You give people jobs and suddenly all of the, not all, but a lot of these problems start to disappear. A job heals a lot.
Right, and you know, an orphanage isn't going to do that. You know, I'm sorry. Right. I mean, that's something that may sound very appealing, but an orphanage doesn't do that. What does it do? It takes that family structure that's already fragile, breaks it apart, so what connections kids had to family that could influence them, I mean, that's gone.
Or being more punitive in the juvenile justice system probably has the same idea. At least if you're going to paint with a very broad brush. I mean, there's bad apples everywhere.
Well, and I don't see the county saying, Alderman, you're right. Let's reform our court system.
Actually, that was something that did come up prior to Alderman Donovan's announcement of it, was a serious reexamination of our juvenile justice system and how we can do a better job of addressing the needs of many of these juveniles that are just stacking the courts. In fact, the crime statistic that was released just today showed that more crime is being committed by even younger juveniles. Mm-hmm. And as a result, there's going to have to be some serious consideration given to whether we're doing the right things with the right resources to help those kids and their families.
Let's see a 10-point plan that focuses on ways to improve communities where kids are coming from, where there's this much stress. That's a plan that people might be able to get behind, because you see an opportunity to move a community forward and not to just say we need to punish.
Reduce the stress.
Next topic. Now that the recall elections are over, let's talk about how the political landscape in the state of Wisconsin changes in the months ahead. Will there be more cooperation, or will Democrats and Republican lawmakers still continue to despise one another? Will the recall Walker effort now move forward, or will it die? Will organized labor lose its influence? And why does Tommy Thompson say he might run for the U.S. Senate, but Russ Feingold says he's not going to run?
I knew it. Let me take the first ones first.
Well,
I know. The landscape, I don't think, has dramatically changed because the Republicans still hold the governor's seat. They still hold both seats in the legislature. And even in the Senate, where the margin has been narrowed, the Republicans still control the machinery. They still have all 16 seats on the Joint Finance Committee. Had the Democrats picked up the Senate, it would have been a 50-50 split on Joint Finance, and as a result, you could have seen some movement towards compromise around legislation that carried a price tag. You're not going to see that now. And contrary to some of the best hopes and dreams of some of the Democrats that want to see movement in their direction and more compromise, Republicans are still Republicans. Even if they're looking at Mike Ellis or the senator from Dale Schultz, they're Republicans. They're going to march in lockstep with the party, and those things that are of most significance to the party and its agenda, they're going to go with it.
There are still people that think, okay, come November, we're going to get organized and we're going to recall Walker. I just don't see that happening. And I don't see how that would change much anyway.
Well, you know, I guess one thing, Gerard, with all due respect, I assume that you've been reading the very good analysis being done by my old colleague Craig Gilbert in the Journal Sentinel.
He's wrong.
Well, maybe he's wrong, but let me...
With all due respect.
With all due respect. Numbers are numbers. And Greg's a pretty nonpartisan guy. Craig is a pretty nonpartisan guy. And he has pretty conclusively shown to me that the results can be very easily read to show a shift toward Democratic sentiment in the state, away from Republican sentiment. Not that it's turned Democratic, but that it's less Republican than it used to be, more Democratic than it used to be. Who knows what that means in the future? But I assume that the people in Madison are just as, are looking at the same numbers, perhaps reaching the same conclusions. I would hope that it would bring us to more, trying to work together kind of thing. I don't know that it will. Whether there will be another recall, who knows? I would like to suggest that the governor might not be the only person that the Democrats might decide to look at. Justice Gableman has been in office for more than a year. It would be very interesting to see the campaign ads that were run against him if somebody tried to recall.
And run a candidate against him, a viable candidate against him, and stop these foolish recalls that waste money.
Well, they don't waste money because people have the opportunity and the right, when there are enough people, as our state constitution allows, to sign petitions who want to recall. That's not wasting money. That's people having the opportunity to use the democratic process and to have their voices heard. And let's remember that when we take a look, now that all the recalls are over, Democrats prevailed in a majority of the recall elections.
They didn't lose any seats. They gained them.
They prevailed. I mean, when you take a look just at the numbers and you divide it up and you say how many Democrats came out of that and how many Republicans, more Democrats prevailed. And I think, to take language not from my thoughts or my lips, but Governor Walker's, where he said people want to see more compromise. And he gets that. Now, if Republicans in the legislature decide that they're not going to get it, that's their choice. But the governor clearly has said he understood what the results of that election mean is that people want to see more bipartisan effort. If Republicans choose to, as Gerard's language, be in lockstep, that's clearly not what voters said that they want to see happen. So I do think there's going to be some compromise. There needs to be compromise, and if there isn't compromise, the next election's
the voters that kept the Republicans in control are the voters that those Republicans are going to listen to. They were the ones that came out to the polls.
Those Republicans that survived the recall.
There were 4 of the 6 Republicans that did survive.
Right. But there were Republicans that did not survive the recall. No Democrats lost in the recall.
Those Republicans are from Republican districts, and those Republican districts sent the message loud and clear that we're the constituency you need to listen to. And I think that's what's going to prevail in future elections when those candidates, for those that are up for re-election, have to face those voters again. Yeah. They're going to hear a message of strong conservatism coming from those districts, and the agenda that they supported that led to the recalls is going to be reinforced in these next 18 months.
Right, Denise, with all due respect,
yes.
you are just so much positive spin and wishful thinking. Now I worked.
It's the numbers, Kevin.
I worked.
It's the numbers.
Well, you want to talk about numbers? I'll give you 3, okay? And you were right. Who controls the governor's mansion? Who controls the state senate? Who controls the state assembly? All right? And now I worked in the state senate for 15 years. And I was there when my party was in the minority by 1, 17 to 16. And I didn't hear this talk from the other side about, well, we need to be more bipartisan, and we need to work together, and we need to get along, and we need to cross the aisle. And Republicans, during that scenario, you know, I'm sure there was talk, well, maybe we can peel off one of their guys.
And you did, because Gary George did peel off. Gary George peeled off on key legislative issues for Republicans.
They hold all the cards, and they're going to go forward with this agenda because the message was loud and clear that the scare the seniors and the class warfare, that didn't work.
The message
that did not work.
The message, first of all, even if it was, the message was, it wasn't loud and clear. There were more Democratic votes cast in the recall elections than there were Republican votes, and there were more elections held in Republican-leading districts. And if you take a look at the trends, you will see that it trended back toward the middle or toward the Democrats. And there are people, politicians are rational people. They're going to see that, and everything's on the margin, you know. All it takes is moving a little bit. I hope that that's what happened. And I will tell you something else about recalls that bothers me, and that is that they are expensive. Yeah. The money comes from somewhere, and the more the money comes to a particular candidate, the more the candidate has to pay attention to where the money came from.
Well, you're right.
That bothers me a little.
And there will be less
on both sides.
And you're right. And there will be less union money coming in now, which means that if you're going to try
local union,
if you're going to, I think national too. The president is going to be, involved in a lot of battleground states around the country. And after what happened in Wisconsin, where millions and millions of dollars went down the tubes and you didn't come up with anything.
That's not true. It didn't go down the tubes. That's not true.
You lost.
That's not true.
It was all about control. I'm talking, Denise. It was all about control, gaining control of the state senate so that you could regain that liberal agenda. It didn't happen.
What did happen, Kevin? Now let's talk about who lost. Who lost? 2 Republicans. Yeah. What? Tell me the Democrats who lost. Tell me the specific Democratic senators who lost in the recall election.
But it didn't matter.
You and every Democrat watching this, you'd rather be on our side with the 2 losses than where you are.
You cannot tell me, because when you take a look at the numbers, Kevin, I'd be shaking my head if I were you now, too.
Fine, Denise. Be happy being in the minority. Be happy with it.
Well, I've been one all my life, and it's worked out pretty well for me so far. So I'm not going to complain about it. It's worked out pretty good so far.
You've been a long-time political minority.
Not long time, just in passing from, that's the great thing about elections. They change, and people who were in the minority are becoming the majority. So the pendulum always swings.
All right, next topic. It looks like the federal government is going to take a brand new look at a proposal from the Menominee Indian tribe to open up a casino at the long-closed Dairyland racetrack in Kenosha. The Potawatomi tribe is going to fight this tooth and nail because they think it'll take a lot of the business away from the casino that they run here in Milwaukee. So how do you see this all playing out, Avi?
Well, you got to start with one thing you got to start with is gambling is here, all right?
That genie's been out of the bottle.
Out of the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
It's right. Okay. It is the way I see it. It purely boils down to dollars and cents for the Indian tribes and for the state and local governments that are involved. I am an agnostic as to whether or not it's a good idea to put an Indian casino, a casino at the old Dairyland track. But if it is going to be done, I would suggest that the responsible authorities take bids, that they put out requests for proposals and say, if you want to run a casino at the old Dairyland track, Indian tribes, how much will you pay the state and how much will you give the local governments to do so? You make it transparent, you put it out there, and you let them bid. It may not happen because if it happens in that kind of a way, there's less possibility that politicians can milk it for a lot of campaign contributions. But if you're talking about how you ought to run the society in the proper way and deal with this in a rational way, put it out for bids. Write a request for proposal and say, any qualified tribe that wants to do it, let us know what your proposal is. Here are the criteria we will use to decide. boom, that's it.
The Indian tribes are big money political players in Wisconsin. How does that change where the money flows?
I tell you that the huge dynamic is that the Republicans, and this is where it relates to the last topic, the Republicans remain in control, and the governor in this case has the last say. Even should the federal government give approval, the governor of the state has the last say. He has the ability to negotiate on behalf of the state whatever the payments to the state are going to be in order to allow that tribe to be there. But there are three entities that are going to be involved in this: the Kenosha interest, the Potawatomi interest, and the interest in Chicago, where they just approved a new casino in Chicago. They're not going to want folk from Northern Illinois to come up to Kenosha or Milwaukee and spend their gaming money. They're going to want them to come to downtown Chicago. So you're going to see these tribes and these gambling interests put some extraordinary pressure on the governor to go either way, either, as in the case with Chicago and the Potawatomi, to deny a casino in Kenosha, or in the case with the largest gaming industry or entity in the nation, with the Menominees, to have him okay that facility.
Actually,
in Kenosha.
it's more complicated than that, because as I recall, the last time around, some of the financing from this was going to come from very large Indian gambling interests on the East Coast, in Connecticut. So it's, I mean, you want to move the politics.
Right.
It's not just two states, it's probably a lot more than that. If you did what I suggested, that all goes away.
Obama, being from Illinois, won't whatever Illinois wants to happen.
Well, the president, don't forget,
this was Daley's project, and Rahm Emanuel was the one who saw this piece through in the early months of his tenure. So now that that's happened, you're right. There's going to be a lot of national parties that are going to be involved in this, and presidential politics will play a role in it. We can't deny that this is something they've opened the door to just before the campaigning kicks off. Illinois is a key state for the president. Wisconsin is a key state for him as well. And they don't have a friendly governor at this point in the governor's residence, as they had with Jim Doyle, who clearly picked up a lot of support from gambling.
It all depends on what the locals think. I mean, let's face it, if they want it, the people who live there, the residents, and their elected officials have to come together and decide, do they want it? And if they want it, then this should be pursued. If they don't, then forget it. The state is on record, that 1993 constitutional amendment that said, the voters said clearly, we have enough gambling here, but then the state Supreme Court 13 years later said that didn't apply to casinos. Right. And now the president has relaxed the rules and regulations about Indian casinos off reservations. So we could see this happen, but I think it's up to the locals to decide.
Would it kill Potawatomi's?
I don't think it would.
Casino?
I mean, I am amazed at the
they're doing okay.
insatiable appetite that we seem to have for gambling, and particularly at casinos. We have a place in northern Michigan. I drive through the UP. Out in the middle of nowhere are these casinos, and the parking lots are jammed full of people. I don't think it's going to hurt Potawatomi if that comes forward, because I just think we have such an appetite.
And for them to cry, that we're poor, come on.
Just do it out in the open. That's how it should be done.
Yeah, I agree.
On to another kind of gambling now. Are you betting that a congressional budget super committee can possibly accomplish what the rest of Congress couldn't do themselves? That's not a bet that Rick Horowitz is willing to take, at least not without some major Capitol Hill attitude adjustment. Rick.
Let's give them the benefit of the doubt, okay? In fact, let's give them lots of benefits of lots of doubts. I'm talking about the political world's no-compromise fringe. Call them, I don't know, let's call them the mighty Republican congressional class of 2010, 87 strong and spoiling for a fight. Mostly, though, I'm talking about one thing we've been hearing a lot lately from the fringe and from their apologists among the talking heads. It sounds something like this. That's what they sent me here to do. Their constituents, their constituents sent them to Congress to do exactly what they're doing, so they couldn't possibly move even 1 millimeter off their particular hardline position on this or that issue. So let's assume you're right, oh mighty freshman. Let's assume that the budget plans you're pushing now are the same ones you were pushing during your campaigns last fall. Let's assume that your constituents heard you and understood what your budget plans would mean, and they were all for it. Let's even assume that those plans were a large reason those constituents voted for you and sent you to Congress. So, welcome to Congress. Have you had a chance to look around? Do you notice all those other seats in the House chamber? All those other people in all those other seats, their constituents send them to Washington too. Amazing but true. If there are 80-some of you, there are 300 plus of them elected the very same day you were. And more than a few of them, Democrats for instance, but not just Democrats, ran campaigns very different from yours. In some cases, they were the exact opposite of yours. You promised lower taxes and smaller government. They promised programs that would put people back to work, or repair crumbling roads and bridges, or invest more in our kids' education, or fund research into the technologies of the future. And let's assume, same as we did with you, that their constituents heard their plans and understood them and supported them, and that that's why they voted for them. So where are we? You made commitments, so did they. You promised X, and they promised not X. I get that. Here's what I don't get. Why are we supposed to treat your commitments to your constituents as gospel and everyone else's commitments to their constituents as garbage?
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.